Hello everyone, this is Amethyst Nightfall and welcome to Warcraft Guides. Today we're going to be talking about tanking. I really enjoy tanking. All of my characters are mostly healers, but after Mop hit, I swear to God, I say this to everybody, Brewmasters were probably the best thing that has ever happened to tanking in a very long time. I love tanking on my Death Knight, but yeah, monks are definitely my favorite. I have 3 Brewmaster monks, and I have always been very religious in the fact that I will not have more than one class. So to say that I have 3 different Brewmaster monks definitely says something about that. Now, what I want to talk to you guys about today is encouraging tanking, I suppose. Now, a friend of mine has recently begun playing WoW a couple months ago, and she's trying out all the different classes and the specs and stuff, and she's getting a good hang of the game. And one thing I want to encourage is for her to be able to experience something outside of DPS. DPS is the one thing that you learn first when it comes to classes. And I feel like people want to learn how to tank and even heal when they hit level 90, and I think that it's better if you start as soon as you can. And the reason why I say that is because players who have started doing dungeons at level 15, that's the minimum level that you can do dungeons at, and they continue on until level 90. They learn really quickly about dungeons and what they need to do, how to be a good participant. They learn what a good healer and a good tank is. They learn all of that, and by the time they get to level 90, they become conditioned. They expect to have a good tank and a good healer, because at level 90, people are expected to know their class and to know their spec already. And then when somebody wants to try a new class or a new spec at level 90 and they're not so good at it, then players in your dungeon get very frustrated, and they can, and as a lot of people know in World of Warcraft, people can be very mean about it. And it can be really disheartening, very discouraging, especially for tanking. I find that's the hardest, because you are already put on a pedestal at a dungeon. You are expected to be the leader. You are expected to know everything. You are expected to blaze through the trash as quickly as possible. You are expected to know the boss mechanics. You are expected to be a really good tank and stay alive and have good damage mitigation and reduction, and if your healer is crappy, you're expected to carry the group, essentially. You are kind of the glue that holds everyone together. So these people expect you to be good. So that's why I am encouraging people who want to try tanking to do so at level 15 or level 20, level 30, those lower levels. Do it as soon as you possibly can. And the same thing with healing. I suggest that as well. Yes. Start training as soon as possible, because you know what? World of Warcraft is serious business. A lot of people do take this game very seriously. So the first thing I guess we should touch on is threat. When you enter a dungeon, everybody in that dungeon generates threat on the monsters that you're fighting. There's a couple ways that you can generate this threat, and I'm going to show you. One way is, there we can see there's a wasp up there, an orchard wasp. If I get close enough to this wasp, oh, just kidding, thanks. If I get close enough to this wasp, he will attack me, because I have entered his aggro radius. So all monsters have an aggro radius or an aggro range. So if you enter that bubble of theirs, or little personal bubble, they will attack you. That's only for hostile enemies, of course. Like, this red crane is not a hostile enemy, so he doesn't have an aggro radius or an aggro range. So I'll just walk all over his face and he won't give a shit. So that's one way. So obviously, if you're in a dungeon and you're playing as a DPS, you want to stay behind the tank, because the tank wants to be the first person to walk up to an enemy. Because if the tank gets close enough, then the enemies will attack him or her. You don't want to be leading if you're a DPS or a healer, because then you're going to get attacked first, and sometimes the tank is just not like quick enough to react. So I guess this video is a little bit about dungeon etiquette as well, not just really focusing on tanking solely, but I just want to talk a little bit about dungeon etiquette as well. Yeah, DPS, please let your tank lead. I know you might be in a rush. Now at level 90, I know people are like, they expect to get into a heroic dungeon and be done in like 10 minutes. But just, please be mindful that people are learning, and people might not be as quick. If you want your tank to be efficient, let them do their thing. Anyway, so moving on with threat. The other way that you generate threat is by attacking or healing. So like me, if I attack this wasp here, I start generating a number of threat on this enemy. And in a dungeon scenario, of course, there would be DPS attacking it as well. Now, whoever does the most damage normally generates the most threat. I'm not going to lie to you, I don't really know how aggro and threat are generated entirely. I don't know how the numbers work, but I do know the basics. You attack enemies, and generally if you have a person who has really high DPS, really high damage, there's a chance that they're going to pull the enemy from the tank. So as a tank, it's your responsibility to keep an eye out for that. A lot of DPS, if they're good, like a rogue will try to, or a hunter will misdirect to a tank if they know they have really high DPS. Some people are just kind of cocky and they want to show off how much DPS they can do, and they don't give a shit. But again, dungeon etiquette. I can't remember what the name of the ability is for rogues. Is it Trick of the Trade? I'm not really sure. I haven't raided in a while. I'm kind of out of practice. But anyway, DPS have some abilities to be able to redirect their amount of threat that they're generating to the tank, so that the tank is able to stay number one on the threat meter per se. And now, one thing I do want to touch on is add-ons. As you can see from my interface, I have pretty much no default Blizzard interface at all. I use a lot of add-ons. But actually, one thing that I don't use is Omen Threat Meter. Omen Threat Meter is one of the basic tanking add-ons, I would say. It looks very much like a recount down here in the bottom right-hand corner. It's basically a list of all the people in the dungeon, and whoever is number one on threat will be number one on the meter. And it's just it's an easy way for you to keep track of your threat on monsters and stuff. I think it's more effective. I mean, you should really only use it on bosses. It's kind of pointless to use it on trash. Anyway, I don't use it personally. I don't really care that much. What I use, I just pay attention to the nameplates. As you see, as I look at this orchard wasp, it has a nameplate above it. If I taunt it, you can see the color turns blue. Now I've had that set up so that all enemies who are attacking me in a dungeon have a blue nameplate, and all enemies that are not attacking me have a red nameplate that has some arrows around it. So I know that if the nameplate is red and has red arrows around it, it's not attacking me, and I need to make sure that I generate threat on that. I need to taunt that enemy and get them attacking me. So to better explain this, I suppose, let's queue up for something really super easy. Temple of the Jade Serpent, because that one's pretty easy. I apologize. This is like the first video I've done where I'm actually talking while I'm recording, so it's not really as scripted and it's not that professional. But hopefully you can get the gist of what I'm trying to talk about. So just try and keep an eye out for the nameplates that I just mentioned. And something else we're going to talk about as well is boss mechanics. Bosses all have abilities, as well as trash. They all have abilities that if you don't keep an eye out for them, they will kick you in the butt. And you need to pay attention and make sure that you're doing whatever you can to avoid getting kicked in the butt. Because if you get kicked in the butt and your healer can't heal you properly because you're taking so much damage, you're going to die. And then if, chances are, it greatly increases the chances of the rest of your group dying. It frustrates people, and like I said, it's all about expectations. People expect you to know what you're doing. So, another add-on that we use for boss mechanics is Deadly Boss Mods. I'm pretty sure almost everybody who plays World of Warcraft knows what Deadly Boss Mods is. It's almost a requirement. And I'll kind of show you as we get into this what I mean here. What's going on here? Is this dungeon halfway done already? Oh no, everybody's just super slow to load. Alrighty. So, talking about mechanics, this trash that I'm coming up to right now actually has a mechanic that people need to look out for. Right, who's my healer? This druid here. Always make sure that your healer is with you. That's one thing as well. Alright, so as you can see, the nameplate is blue. Now these ones are red. They're attacking the druid. So we're gonna generate threat on them. Okay. That water that just appeared on the ground will kick my butt if I don't get out of it. So I need to not stand in it. And if I stand in it, my health will drop very, very quickly. Oh, this healer is just... That's okay. I'm alright with that. But as you can see right now, I have all blue nameplates. That means everything is attacking me. And that's what we want. And you can't just watch out for threat as well. One thing that you also need to look out for is the damage that you're taking. There are a lot of things as a tank that you need to pay attention to. So always try to keep an eye on your health bar. If you're taking a lot of damage, you're probably doing something wrong, or you need to start popping some damage mitigation abilities so that you are not taking that amount of damage for whatever reason. Maybe the healer's not healing you. Maybe, this particular boss or group of trash just happens to do a lot of damage and there's nothing you can do about it. So just going back to discuss Deadly Boss Mods, it was an add-on that I mentioned earlier, and it basically just tells you what to do during boss fights. I know there's a lot going on when you're raiding and doing dungeons, and when you're tanking, you have a lot of things to pay attention to, so this just kind of helps. As you see the blue text in the middle of the screen that says Corrupt Living Water, Switch Targets, that's this enemy that we're fighting now. This is the living water that it was telling us to attack. And it'll tell you that every time one spawns. And then here it says Shaw Residue Move Away. That's that water that we saw earlier that kicks your butt if you stand in it. So it's just telling you to move away from the water. So that you move away as quickly as possible without learning the hard way that it can kill you. So yes, Deadly Boss Mods is very helpful. Especially in raiding scenarios or when you're doing new dungeons that you haven't read up on yet, or you've never done them and you're not really quite sure what to do. It helps increase that learning curve and help you to learn just a little bit faster. This boss has fairly simple mechanics. Essentially, you keep killing these water enemies that come up. They'll spawn and then they'll come near you, and you just basically taunt them and kill them. And after you've killed a certain amount, then you can attack the boss. Right now he's unattackable. He's immune to all damage, so there's no point in trying to kill him. We have to go through the first phase of the fight first. And And that first phase is killing these adds. And as you can see, as they spawn, I just taunt them over to me. Taunt is your basic tanking ability. Every single tanking class and spec has a taunt ability. It normally has like a 5-second cooldown or something like that. Anywhere between 5 and 10 seconds usually. Yes, your basic tanking ability, that's like the first tanking ability you get. I would really have preferred to have done this video a little bit differently. I would have liked to do these in different steps where I was talking about add-ons and boss mechanics and just generally being a tank in different videos, but I thought that doing a dungeon and recording it would be the best way to show people exactly what I mean. And I figured I could try and do this all in the span of one dungeon, just to kind of give you the general idea of what tanking is all about. So I'm sorry if this is a lot of information to take in, but I just thought this would be the best way. Again, this trash, pretty easy. I'm just keeping an eye out for the nameplates, make sure I'm generating enough threat on these enemies to keep them from attacking other people. And this is pretty easy trash. I've done this dungeon a lot. I know that this is really simple trash and that they don't do a lot of damage. As you can see, my health is not going down at all. So I just basically, I'm not worrying about any damage reduction or damage mitigation abilities. I'm not worrying about that at all because this trash is easy. They're not doing a whole lot of damage to me. And you really only want to pop your damage mitigation and damage reduction cooldowns when you're taking massive amounts of damage to help your healer out. That's essentially what it's for. When you're doing raids, you're going to have to time your cooldowns because there's going to be boss abilities that happen every minute or every 2 minutes or something, and you've got to time it so that your cooldowns are on time with those massive attacks that those bosses are going to do to you. So there's more strategy involved in raiding, but dungeons are the best way to prepare you for those raids. And you'll learn fairly quickly. You're going to know from the first dungeon through whether or not you should pull a certain amount of enemies because they're difficult enemies and they're going to kick your butt. These enemies are pretty easy, and I'm just really worried about keeping threat. One thing that you should remember, though, is that not all trash is the same, and there is some trash out there that will do some damage. They have some mechanics that you should really be aware of. And for example, these 3 Shaw minions up here, as you'll see, they drop purple blobs on the ground, purple circles on the ground that you shouldn't stand in because they will do damage to you over time. So anybody who stands in it will receive that damage. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm not standing in it, and I'm going to pull them away from the large group because they just put 2 down, and I want to make sure that people don't, that the other DPS and that the healers and stuff don't end up standing in it. I want to make this as easy for them as possible. Now, this boss up here is pretty much your standard type of boss. A couple things to remember. When you pull a boss, you should turn the boss around. And the reason for this is because some bosses have abilities, cleave abilities per se, that will do damage directly in front of them, and you want to take that damage. You don't want everybody else in your group taking that damage. That and all enemies in the game cannot parry attacks from behind. They can dodge attacks, but they can't parry attacks. So this kind of leaves a window of opportunity open for your DPS. It allows them to maximize the amount of damage that they can do on a boss. If they were fighting a boss from the front, then there's that potential that the boss can parry their attack, and then that attack is avoided by the boss. However, if you turn the boss around, then the boss cannot avoid that attack, and they will get hit no matter what. So this essentially just maximizes the DPS and the damage that you're doing on a boss, which is really important in raids, because in raids, enemies have bosses have berserk timers, so you basically have a time frame, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, to kill a boss. And if you don't kill a boss within that time frame, they enrage and their damage gets really crazy, and you basically just wipe. You die, and it's no fun. So essentially, we want to make sure that the DPS is able to do their job effectively as well. To summarize this introduction guide to tanking, we talked about 3 important aspects. The first is threat. It is your job as a tank to generate a high amount of threat on all of the enemies that your group is currently attacking, and to keep up that threat, to ensure the survivability and the safety of everyone in your group. As a tank, you have the most armor, you have the most survivability out of anyone in the whole group. You're going to have the most health. It's your job to be able to take that damage. Secondly, damage mitigation. There are going to be times where bosses are going to do massive amounts of damage to you, and you've got to strategize ways to reduce the amount of damage that you're taking, because the healer has other people in the group to heal. The healer has other things that they need to concentrate on, and even though you are #1 priority, sometimes you're taking so much damage that the healer can't even cast fast enough in order to keep you alive. That's how much damage you're taking. Well, you need to predict and find ways to be able to minimize the amount of damage that you're taking in those situations. Sometimes it takes time. You have to learn and you have to adapt. You have to die once in a while to learn these things and to be able to adapt and create strategies. But that's all a part of being a tank. And the third thing is paying attention to your surroundings. A lot of healers and tanks get what's called tunnel vision. They essentially just look down at their buttons the whole time and their cooldowns and stuff, and they forget to look around. They forget to look at any AoE that's on the ground, and then you're standing in an AoE, and before you know it, you're dead, and you're like, oh, what happened? Well, it's because you weren't paying attention. You're not paying attention to the trash or what the boss is doing. You're just not paying attention to the things you need to pay attention to. Maybe you can only pay attention to one thing. If that's the case, you need either more practice or maybe tanking's not for you. But it's really important to have your eyes all over your screen. You need to pay attention to absolutely everything that's going on in order to be the best player that you can possibly be. Because remember, there's a lot of people in this dungeon who are relying on you to stay alive and to pay attention and to lead this group. It doesn't matter if you have all of the threat or if you have good damage mitigation. If you're not paying attention to boss mechanics and you're not paying attention to damage that you're taking, it's very important that you pay attention to these kind of things. It's difficult for newer players. It takes them a little bit longer to develop that sense of, oh, I need to look out for this and I need to look out for that. But it's definitely probably your #1 priority. You need to pay attention. I realized that I did not go into specifics about abilities that you can use, and that's because obviously there's a lot of tanking classes and specs, and honestly I don't play them all, so I wouldn't have the knowledge anyway, but you need to just generalize with me through this video. So when I say damage mitigation abilities, I mean, for example, ability A reduces the damage that you take by 20% for 10 seconds. That's a damage mitigation ability. They're very, very crucial to tanking. And as I said before, every tank has a taunt ability. That's a basic tanking ability that you're going to use a lot to grab threat from one enemy who runs away from the group, per se. And I did mention a couple of add-ons in the video, and if you have any questions about the add-ons that I use, I'd be happy to answer them. Just leave a comment below and I can do that. But essentially, the things that I would require if I was in a serious raiding guild, if I was a raid leader, I would say you need deadly boss mods for sure. Omni CC to keep track of the exact timers of your cooldowns. Some things I do find very helpful are WeakAuras or PowerAuras Classic, depending on which you prefer and which you want to use. but probably the #1 tanking add-on that I would suggest is TidyPlates or any other customizable nameplate add-on, because that is really going to be key. It's going to allow you to pay attention to the enemies and who's attacking who more effectively than, say, Omen Threat Meter. As I said before, use Omen Threat Meter on bosses if you want, but it's not going to help you with trash. It really isn't. You just need to pay attention and look at the screen. That's what you need to do. So I highly suggest TidyPlates or any other add-on that is similar to it. I will leave a list of the add-ons in the video description and where you can download them. Feel free to experiment with any other add-ons. I'm not saying that my UI is perfect or that I couldn't use any more tanking add-ons to make my tanking better. So just kind of explore, mess around with them, see what does well for you. If you have any questions about the add-ons that I use or how I got my UI a specific way, again, just ask a question. But that concludes Warcraft Guide's Introduction to Tanking, and I will see you guys next time.